Chapter 5: The Ocean of the Self. It wasn't until I truly considered the ocean that I began to understand what I had become. I had thought of myself as a divided entity, fire on one side, water on the other, perpetually at war. But the ocean doesn't divide itself. It holds everything at once: the calm surface, the violent storms, the cold depths that swallow light whole, the fire above it too, reflected in its vastness, shaping its currents without extinguishing its existence. I realized I was not made of two opposing forces. I was the ocean. There's a strange comfort in imagining yourself as something as vast and uncontainable as the sea. It allows you to stop searching for the edges of who you are, to stop pretending that you can map yourself neatly into something understandable. The ocean defies that kind of clarity, and in doing so, it offers freedom. The fire in me is still there, of course, but I no longer think of it as separate. It is the sun that dances on the waves, the heat that stirs the currents, the energy that drives the tides. The water, meanwhile, is not just reflection or doubt, it is depth. It is the part of me that goes down so far that even I cannot see the bottom, and I've stopped trying to reach it. What I am learning is this: you do not master the ocean, you live within it. It is not an easy lesson. My mind, like any mind, craves order. I want to know where the fire begins and the water ends, to separate them into clean, understandable categories. But the ocean doesn't allow for that. Its currents move in ways that are both deliberate and unknowable, shaped by forces too complex to unravel. This is what I am learning to accept: that I am not a problem to be solved. For years I tried to contain myself, to mold my fire into something productive, to dam the water so it wouldn't rise. I thought that was what it meant to be in control, to live with fire and water inside me. But control is an illusion. The ocean is not meant to be contained. When I stopped trying to fight it, I began to notice the ways in which the fire and water move together, not in conflict, but in a kind of rhythm. The fire heats the surface, and the water carries that warmth into the depths. The water cools the flames, and the fire turns it into steam, rising upward, where it falls again as rain. It is a cycle, endlessly repeating, endlessly transforming. For so long, I thought that my fire was my strength and my water my weakness. But the truth is that neither could exist without the other. Fire is powerful, yes, but without water it would burn out, leaving nothing but ash. Water is steady and reflective, but without fire it would stagnate, becoming cold and lifeless. Together, they create something alive. The same is true of me. I've begun to think of myself less as a person and more as a process, not a static being, fixed in time and space, but a living system, constantly changing, constantly in motion. It is a strange way to think of yourself. We are taught to believe in permanence, in the idea that we are who we are, that our identities are fixed and knowable. But the ocean doesn't work that way. Neither do we. To live as the ocean is to live in contradiction. To accept that you are both fire and water, both creation and destruction. It is to understand that you will never be whole, because wholeness is a myth. But it is also to understand that this is not a flaw. It is the nature of existence. I think often of the depth of the ocean, of the way it holds everything, the sunlight at its surface, the darkness at its bottom. I think of the fire reflected on its waves, the way it dances and shifts, never still. This is what I am learning to embrace: the vastness of myself. The fact that I cannot be contained, cannot be simplified into something neat or tidy. The fact that I am, like the ocean, both beautiful and dangerous, both calm and storm. It is not an easy thing to accept. There are still days when I feel myself sinking, when the fire burns too brightly or the water rises too high. There are still moments when I long for clarity, for order, for an end to the endless motion inside me. But then I remind myself the ocean has no end. If fire and water are the forces that define me, then the ocean is what holds them. It is not balance. Exactly, balance implies stillness, and there is no stillness here. But it is something close to harmony, a rhythm, a movement, a cycle that continues, whether I understand it or not. This is the truth I am learning to live with. I am not one thing. I am not fire or water or even the sum of their parts. I am something larger, something more expansive, something I cannot yet fully comprehend. And that I think is enough. There is a point at which exhaustion becomes identity. It stops being a state you pass through and becomes a space you inhabit. The body adapts, the mind follows. You no longer remember the before, you learn to call the erosion living. This is not the kind of tired that sleep fixes. It is cellular, atmospheric. It soaks into your language, what becomes the way you move, the way you speak, the silences you hold between words. You become slow, not by choice, but by necessity. Every decision, every thought must pass through the filter of weariness. When I speak of erosion, I do not mean collapse. Collapse is sudden, collapse is dramatic. Erosion is quieter. It happens slowly, relentlessly, a soft, consistent wearing away. The drip of water over stone, the wind against the face of a building, the way pages fade when left too long in sunlight. You don't notice it at first. You continue as before. You perform your routines. You meet deadlines. You smile. But beneath it all, something is thinning. Your edge dulls. Your responses lag. The fire that once ignited you now flickers at the edges. And still, you keep going because to pause would mean to feel, and to feel would mean admitting that something is wrong. There were mornings I stared at my reflection and saw someone I no longer recognized, not because I looked broken, because I looked functional, efficient, intact. And yet, inside, something vital had eroded. I brushed my teeth. I answered emails. I made small talk. I cooked dinner. But I did it all as if moving through water, heavy, slow, detached. No one noticed. Why would they? The world is fluent in the language of surface. We reward performance, not presence. I remember one afternoon in particular. I was walking home and I stopped at a red light. I watched the signal change, then change again. I didn't move, not because I was frozen, because I had forgotten why I was walking at all. The purpose had dissolved. I stood there for 7 full cycles of that light before my body decided to move. Not my mind, my body. It had taken over, carrying me home like an animal returning to its den out of instinct, not desire. That was the day I realized I had stopped making choices. I was no longer living, I was continuing. There is a danger in competence. It hides the erosion. People see what you produce and assume you are fine. They praise your output, your clarity, your ability to keep going. They mistake discipline for wellness. They cannot see that you are running on memory. I have delivered lectures with tears drying on my face. I have written essays with my hands shaking from panic. I have sat on panels discussing mental health while silently negotiating with my own. This is not resilience. This is necessity. This is what it looks like to survive erosion without exit. Sleep doesn't help. Nutrition doesn't help. Exercise doesn't help. Not because those things are useless, but because the problem is not physical. The problem is internal, structural, foundational. It is the problem of too many years spent performing without pause, too many months spent pretending that function equaled stability, Too many days spent ignoring the warning signs because there was always another deadline, another meeting, another expectation. You can't schedule repair. You can't time box your healing. Erosion doesn't work on a calendar. People ask sometimes what I need. What they mean is, how can I help you get back to who you were? But there is no back. There is only forward. And forward is uncertain. I no longer aim to return to a previous state. I am not trying to rebuild what was. I am learning how to live in this new shape, this eroded version of myself, this quieter self, this slower self, not broken, but changed. And that change is permanent. There are gifts in erosion, if you look closely, not the kind we romanticize, not wisdom or insight or sudden clarity, but subtler things. The ability to sit still, the capacity to listen without formulating a response, the realization that nothing, not even your most sacred identity, is immune to time. I have learned how to need less, how to speak less, how to hold silence without fearing what it means. I have learned that erosion strips away what is unnecessary. What remains is what was always true. I do not envy my old self. I respect them. I thank them. But I do not wish to be them. They burn too hot. They move too fast. They mistook exhaustion for progress. Now I move differently. I choose differently. I say no more often. I do not apologize for being slow. I do not apologize for being tired. I do not apologize for needing to rebuild. This is not a redemption arc. This is not recovery. This is not about bouncing back. This is about adaptation. This is about looking at the ruins of your former self and deciding to live there anyway, to plant seeds in the cracks, to build small shelters, to light candles when the electricity fails. This is about finding beauty in what remains. This is about choosing to stay, even when the erosion continues, especially then. Chapter 6: The Eternal Dance. There are no conclusions in life, only continuations. I used to think otherwise, that I was building towards some great moment of resolution, some triumph over the forces that shaped me. But there is no final act, no victory, no defeat. There is only the dance, and that I have come to believe is the truest form of existence. Not balance, not stillness, but movement. Fire and water, creation and destruction, endlessly circling each other, endlessly reshaping the world and me. I think of fire now, not as a force of domination, but as a partner. Its hunger no longer feels like a threat, it feels like a purpose. Fire consumes, yes, but it also transforms. It turns the old into the new, the raw into the refined. It clears the path, making way for something else to grow. Water, too, has revealed itself to be more than I once imagined. It is not simply doubt or erosion, though it is both of those things. It is also reflection. Water does not destroy for the sake of destruction, it reshapes. It does not erase, it clarifies. In its depths, I have seen truths I would never have discovered in the fire. Together, they have made me who I am, not a static being, not a fixed identity, but something living, changing, evolving. To live in this way is not easy. It is to accept that there will always be conflict, always be tension. There are still days when the fire threatens to consume me, driving me to the brink of exhaustion, demanding more than I can give. And there are days when the water rises too high, pulling me under, drowning me in doubt and fear. But there are also days when they move together, creating something neither could achieve alone. Days when the fire heats the water, and the water tempers the fire, and the steam rises into the air, carrying me forward. These are the days I live for. I used to think I was broken, that to feel this constant push and pull, this endless motion inside me was a flaw. But now I understand I am not broken, I am dynamic. This is the lesson fire and water have taught me, that growth is not linear. It is not a path that leads from one point to another. It is a dance, a cycle, a process of endless transformation. There will be no resolution, no final moment when I look at myself and say, I am finished, I am complete. That is not how life works. Instead, there will be motion, there will be fire and water, shaping and reshaping me over and over again. And that, I have learned, is enough. I think often of the ocean, of the way it holds the fire and water within it, never still, never settled. I think of its storms and its calms, its depths and its shallows. The ocean does not seek balance. It does not try to reconcile its contradictions. It simply moves. I am learning to do the same. If you are reading this, perhaps you too have felt the fire and water inside you. Perhaps you have struggled to make sense of them, to find a way to contain them, to control them. If so, I have no advice to offer, no answers to give. But I will say this: let them move, let the fire burn, let the water rise, let them collide, destroy, create. You will not find stillness, but you will find motion, you will find life. As I write these words, I can feel the fire flickering inside me, warming the edges of my thoughts. I can feel the water, cool and steady, guiding me, shaping me. They are not enemies. They are not separate. They are the same force, the same dance, the same endless process of becoming. And I am grateful for them. This is not the end. It is not the beginning either. It is simply one step in the dance, one moment in the rhythm of fire and water, one part of the ocean of the self. I will keep moving, I will keep burning, I will keep drowning, and I will keep living. There are disappearances that happen all at once. A door slams shut, a sudden silence, the cold trace of absence left behind like steam fading from a mirror. But the disappearance I know best is slower. It doesn't start with leaving, it starts with fading, a gradual receding of presence, not noticeable at first. You still speak, you still move, you still exist, but only in the technical sense. This is the disappearance of self. You become a ghost in your own life. I remember the first signs. They were small, almost forgettable. The way I hesitated before using my own name. The pause before declaring a preference. The growing discomfort in mirrors, not because of how I looked, but because I no longer recognized the narrative behind my reflection. I started answering questions with disclaimers. I don't know really, or it doesn't matter to me. At first it seemed like humility, then like flexibility. Then it became a pattern. Then it became the truth. Nothing mattered. Not in a grand existential way, but in the quiet erosion of identity. Choices felt performative. Desires felt fabricated. Even pleasure became suspect. Was I enjoying something, or was I simply remembering how to mimic enjoyment? This is what it means to disappear while remaining visible. People rarely notice. Why would they? We reward disappearance. We call it selflessness. We call it adaptability. We call it politeness. We call it maturity. The less you take up space, the more you are praised for being easy. But disappearing is not the same as becoming easier to love. It is not growth. It is subtraction. And eventually you subtract so much of yourself, there's nothing left to offer. I've watched it happen in conversations. I begin a sentence and stop midway through, not because I forgot what I was saying, but because I no longer believed it needed to be said. I defer, I yield, I vanish, one decision at a time. I start to write and stop before the second paragraph, not out of doubt, but disinterest. Who is this person speaking? What do they want? Why are they bothering to speak at all? That disinterest is terrifying. It is not the absence of energy. It is the absence of reason. It is not fatigue. It is vacancy. In the earlier days of fire, I believed I had a self to protect, a self to assert. The fire demanded it. My opinions were urgent. My desires were gospel. My voice was a tool, a weapon, a banner. I shaped myself in declarations. But as the water rose, the declarations stopped. The urgency dulled. Not because I had resolved anything, but because the self that once needed defending had grown quiet. And then it began to dissolve. The solution is not surrender. It is not spiritual transcendence. It is not peace. It is not some noble state of egoless wisdom. It is disorientation. It is watching the shape of your thoughts blur around the edges. It is failing to remember what you used to love. I used to have favorite songs, favorite colors, favorite textures. I used to have clear dislikes. Now everything is muted. Everything is fine. I miss having strong reactions. I miss the stubbornness of preference. I miss the boldness of want. And yet, I am not entirely gone. There are flickers, unexpected sparks, a phrase in a book, a song played accidentally, a scent in a crowd that summons an entire forgotten life. These moments remind me that the self has not died, only receded. There is a self still somewhere, submerged beneath the water, watching, waiting, gathering itself in quiet. I am learning now not to rush the return. The self does not emerge on command. It does not respond to willpower. It returns when conditions are right, when safety is restored, when curiosity outpaces fear. Until then, I live in the in-between, not fully present, not fully absent, navigating my days with partial coordinates, improvising identity where once I had conviction. Some days I say my name aloud just to remember how it feels in my mouth. Some days I look at old photographs and try to remember how it felt to be that person. Some days I let the silence answer for me. This is not about finding myself. That phrase is a fiction. There is no fixed self to recover, only a series of versions shaped by time and context and pressure. This is about recognizing which parts of me I allowed to disappear, which I hid, which I sacrificed for love, or belonging, or survival, and deciding deliberately which I will reclaim. Not all of them, not the performative ones, not the fire for the sake of fire selves, but the true ones, the quiet ones, the ones that lived even when no one was looking. I do not have a roadmap. I do not know what the final version of me will look like. But I know this. I am still here. I am the one who noticed the disappearance. I am the one speaking now. And that for now is enough. Chapter 7. The Fire in Others. For most of my life, I believed my fire was mine alone. It burned brightly, consuming my thoughts, my days, my relationships. It was a force that defined me, and yet it isolated me. I imagined it as a singular blaze, unique in its hunger, incomparable in its ferocity. But fire does not exist in isolation. I know this now. Fire is communal by nature. It spreads, connects, ignites, illuminates. The fire in me is not separate from the fires in others. We are all carriers of this flame, living in its warmth and bearing its weight. To see the fire in others is to recognize that we are not as solitary as we think. It is to understand that the same force that drives me forward burns in the hearts of everyone around me, each in their own way. The hidden flames. It started with a quiet observation, one I didn't fully grasp until years later. I was sitting in a cafe watching the people around me, lost in their own moments. A man at the corner table stared intently at a notebook, scribbling furiously, his movements quick and erratic. Across the room, a woman tapped at her laptop, her face calm but her fingers trembling as they raced across the keyboard. At the time, I thought little of it. But now, when I think back to that moment, I see it differently. I see the fire. The man's fire burned with urgency, a consuming need to put something, an idea, a thought, a piece of himself onto the page. The woman's fire was quieter, but no less intense, a steady determination to finish what she had started, no matter the cost. Neither of them spoke of their fire. They didn't need to. It was there, in the flicker of their eyes, in the tension of their movements, in the energy that seemed to radiate from them. Most people hide their flames, keeping them small and contained. They fear what might happen if they let them burn too brightly, if they let the fire take over. They worry it will consume them, or worse, that it will consume the people they love, and so they keep their fires hidden, even from themselves. The fires we inherit. When I was a child, I thought my parents were invincible. My father was all fire, a man who seemed to live in constant motion, always chasing the next goal, the next achievement. My mother was quieter, steadier, her fire contained but unyielding. At the time, I didn't understand what I was seeing. I didn't recognize their fire for what it was. I only saw the results: my father's relentless drive, my mother's quiet determination. But now, as I carry my own fire, I see theirs more clearly. My father's fire was both his greatest strength and his greatest burden. It fueled his ambition, his success, but it also left him restless, unable to stop, even when he was exhausted. My mother's fire was her anchor, a source of stability that kept her grounded even in the face of my father's storms. I carry pieces of both of them in me. My father's hunger, my mother's patience. Their fires have shaped mine, just as mine will shape the fires of those who come after me. The cost of fire. Fire is a gift, but it is not without cost. It demands fuel, and it takes what it needs without asking. I have seen the damage fire can do. I have watched it consume people, leaving them burned out, hollow. I have felt its heat in my own life, in the relationships I have sacrificed to feed my flames, in the moments I have lost to its unrelenting hunger. There was a time when I thought the cost was worth it. I believed that the fire was the only thing that mattered, that it was better to burn brightly and briefly than to live in quiet mediocrity. But fire is not meant to destroy, it is meant to create. I didn't understand this until I saw the fire in others, until I began to recognize its beauty, not in its destruction, but in its light, the light of connection. When I started to see the fire in others, something shifted in me. I began to notice the way their flames flickered and danced, the way they illuminated the world around them. There is something extraordinary about sharing your fire with someone else. It is not about comparison or competition. It is not about whose flame burns brighter or longer. It is about the way the light grows when two fires meet. I think of a conversation I had with a friend late one night when the rest of the world was asleep. We talked for hours, our words flowing like sparks, igniting ideas we hadn't known we carried. Her fire was different from mine, calmer, more deliberate. But together, our flames created something new, a light that lingered long after the conversation ended. This is the power of fire. It connects us, brings us closer, reminds us that we are not alone,